All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a highly detailed blueprint called National Developmental Economic Holding Units, or NDEHU for short. It's a fascinating, highly structured framework designed to completely rethink the modern social contract. It basically shifts how we think about wealth, citizenship, and national progress from the ground up.
Because we really want to cover all the details of this dense economic model, here is our roadmap for today. First, the wealth decoupling problem. Second, the core NDEHU engine. Third, spending and rebuying rules. Fourth, safeguards, fines, and death. And finally, number 5, the macroeconomic future.
Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, the wealth decoupling problem. So, we really have to start by looking at what many consider a massive glitch in modern capitalism, the fact that GDP growth is totally decoupled from actual citizen wealth. Think about it. When a nation's economy booms, the vast majority of the general public just doesn't see a proportional benefit in their daily lives. Right now, a child is born into a financial baseline of exactly 0. If they want to afford higher education, healthcare, or start a business, they usually have to rely on prior family savings or take on massive debt, right, which just mortgages their future. Well, the NDEHU model totally flips this default state. Under this blueprint, every living citizen is allotted 1,000 guaranteed equity units at birth. It shifts the entire paradigm from a debt-driven baseline to an equity-backed baseline.
Because right now, the reality is kind of bleak. Under the traditional model, everyday citizens are routinely forced into predatory loans just to hit basic life milestones. And without some kind of systemic change, as AI scales corporate profits and automation disrupts jobs, the average worker is staring down severe wage stagnation. It's basically an inescapable poverty trap for the working population.
Which brings us right to Section 2, the core NDE2 engine.
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth does a country actually fund and sustain 1,000 equity units for every single citizen without going totally bankrupt? Well, the secret sauce is this mathematical formula right here. It recalculates on the first of every single month to dynamically link your 1,000 units directly to the nation's aggregate profitability. The value of a unit is simply the total sovereign reserve pool divided by the number of active living units. Think of it like this. Your personal wealth becomes intrinsically mathematically tied to the macroeconomic growth of the country itself.
So where does that reserve pool come from? It's fed by a 1 to 10% statutory tax on corporate net profit. And here is the real game changer. It acts as a pure pass-through sovereign reserve. This means the payouts are 100% backed by collected tax revenue, creating absolutely zero deficit risk or balance sheet liability for the government itself. Plus, the model includes a 50% tax discount on export revenues just to incentivize domestic companies to scale globally, which, you guessed it, further boosts that national reserve.
But wait a minute, let's rigorously stress test this for a second. If the whole fund relies on a percentage of net profit, how do we actually stop massive multinational corporations from doing what they always do? Hiding their profits through clever accounting tricks.
Enter the alternate minimum entry tax, or AMT. It acts as an impenetrable shield for the system. In traditional systems, companies might erase their taxable net profit by funneling all their surplus cash into massive executive bonuses or stock buybacks. But under the AMT, if a company reports an artificially low profit but still splurges on all those executive perks, they get hit with a direct 10% flat tax on that total benefit pool. It completely neutralizes the accounting loopholes companies use to compress their taxable profits.
All right, moving smoothly along to Section 3, spending and rebuying rules.
So we've got the engine built and funded, but what's the actual user manual for regular folks? How does citizens interact with this capital? A massive concern with handing out equity is the risk of parents just draining their kids' funds. To prevent that kind of generational wealth depletion, the blueprint outlines very strict age rules. From ages 0 to 12, parents can only use a maximum of 10% of their own NDEHU for the child's needs. Then, between 12 and 18, only 50% of the child's units can be accessed for very specific things. This guarantees that when a young adult finally turns 18, they enter society with a protected, largely intact financial foundation.
And by the way, you can't just cash these units out to buy yourself a sports car or go on vacation. By running exclusively on programmable digital currency, like a purpose-bound e-rupee, for example, the system cuts out administrative bloat and completely kills black market cashback fraud. The smart contracts ensure that these funds can literally only be transferred to verified institutional merchants for things like education, healthcare, or starting a business.
But let's say life happens, and you do need to cash out for a medical emergency. Can you ever get those units back to restore your 1,000 unit cap?
Actually, yes. This tiered buyback schedule provides a really crucial recovery runway. For the first 2 years, you can buy them back at the exact price you cashed out at. After that, it starts to scale up. This is a brilliant way to eliminate long-term speculative arbitrage, so you can't just sit on a cheap cash-out receipt for 20 years, while still giving a low-income family a fair window to recover without getting crushed by a sudden market boom.
Let's dive into Section 4, Safeguards, Fines, and, well, Death.
We need to look at the edge cases here. Specifically, what happens during legal trouble or total insolvency. These NDEHU units are essentially bulletproof. They cannot be transferred, they can't be inherited, and you can't pledge them as collateral for a loan. It creates an absolute lifetime poverty floor. Even if you go completely bankrupt, private lenders cannot touch your units. And what if you face severe criminal fines or civil judgments? Well, judicial deductions are hard capped at a maximum of 50%. This guarantees that, no matter what, a citizen always retains a baseline floor for survival and rehabilitation.
So what happens when someone passes away? Because units cannot be inherited, all uncashed units are permanently pulled back from circulation into the central fund. This creates this phenomenal wealth multiplier effect. Natural mortality is continuously shrinking the denominator, the active circulating units, while the accumulated tax reserves stay locked in the fund. This mathematical contraction automatically drives up the per-unit value for all surviving citizens. It literally rewards long-term holders.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the macroeconomic future.
Let's zoom out, say, 20 to 50 years to see how all these intricate little details synthesize into a balanced macroeconomic future. This table illustrates how the whole system reacts to different economic cycles. A birth rate spike with flat profits, you get mild dilution. GDP expands, value appreciates. But take a close look at that citizen cash-out row. When someone cashes out, liquid capital leaves the reserve pool, sure, but those redeemed units are also temporarily retired from the active unit pool. Because both sides of the equation shrank at the exact same time, there is zero phantom dilution for the rest of the nation. The unit valuation stays perfectly neutral.
And here, honestly, is the ultimate payoff for the next half-century. As AI and robotics disrupt traditional labor, they are naturally going to inflate corporate profit margins. This NDEHU model natively captures that massive tech boom through the 1% to 10% tax, instantly distributing it as public dividends. The general public gets an expanding dividend from machine productivity automatically, without the government needing to constantly pass complex new welfare laws or rack up sovereign debt.
It totally rewires the psychological contract of a nation. As this quote highlights, instead of workers feeling alienated by massive corporate profits or being terrified of mass job displacement from AI, their interests become perfectly aligned with corporate and technological success. When tech giants report record earnings, every single citizen's baseline equity literally goes up in real time.
The NDEHU framework isn't just about clever financial mechanics. It's an attempt to redefine economic dignity from birth to death. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to consider. If AI is fundamentally altering the value of human labor as we know it, isn't it time our social safety nets evolve from a baseline of debt to a baseline of sovereign equity? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a lot to think about.